Yes.
We are 25 participants.
Recording in progress. So, hello everybody. Oh, Horas. Horas is a greeting in Batak, Indonesian Batak ethnic group, which is very expressive. It means grateful, health, and blessing. That's why the greeting Horas, it's more expressive. Horas, everybody. And you you just answer Horas.
Thank you, Horas.
It's the same like greetings ciao in Italy.
In
or,
Italian,
something like that. Horas in Batak is in Indonesian is Horas.
Thank you.
And I started to popularize this because it's very expressive and the meaning is very deep. So Horas, it's Horas. Okay. So Horas, everybody, I am very happy to welcome you all in our session dedicated to G20 summit in Indonesia. What opportunity for BRICS, NAM, and Russia-Ukraine crisis. We will have 10 speakers, 5 from BRICS and NAM countries. They are Koni Rahakundini Bakri, Senior Defense and Military Analyst based in Jakarta. And then the second speaker from BRICS country, China, Yin Tiguang, staff professor of international relations at Fudan University, Shanghai, but at the moment he is based in UK.
UK, okay. And
then the third from India. India is at the same time BRICS and non-alignment country. Yusha Tiwari from Delhi University. At the same time, she is a scholar in international relation, political sciences, and also Chinese studies. And she is the coordinator of Bandung Spirit Community India. And then the fourth, we have from South Africa, a country of BRICS and non-alignment at the same time, Sifamandla Zondi from University of Johannesburg. He is also political scientist and international relations, but it seems that he is not there yet. Let's hope that he will come. And then the fifth from Russia, which is BRICS country, Elena Veduta from Lomonosov Moscow State University, professor and director of strategic planning department at Lomonosov Moscow State University. And then we will have 5 speakers from outside BRICS and NAM countries, mainly from Europe, all Western Europe. From Greece, Dimitris Konstantakopoulos, journalist and former advisor of Prime Minister Papandreou for East-West relations and arms control based in Athens. And now he is editor-in-chief of Defend Democracy Press. I don't see him entering. And then from Poland, Grażon Simek, professor.
I'm here.
Yes. Oh,
good evening.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Very good. Okay. And then Grażon Simek from Naval Academy of Gdynia. He is also a political scientist and also international relations based in Gdynia, which is a city in Poland. And from Hungary, Anna Maria Adner, she is economist, professor at Institute of World Economics based in Budapest. And then from France, Bruno Droeski, who is professor on historian and political scientist, specialized in Eastern, Central and Eastern Europe, or Slavic studies maybe, from National Institute of Oriental Languages and Civilizations, Paris. And then the last, from Austria, Professor Hans Kochler was Emeritus Professor of Innsbruck University in Philosophy and International Law, I think. Now it is he is active in International Progress Organization based in Vienna. And we will co-chair Isaac Bazier, who is now in Burkina Faso. He is professor at University of Quebec in Montreal, but at the moment he is in Burkina Faso. I hope that there is no connection problem in Ouagadougou. And also myself, based in Paris, and I am assisted by 3 students as co-host from Universitas Erlangga, Surabaya, Azah, Fikri, and Saif. So let's start. This is our topic. Since we have 10 speakers, I hope that everybody speaks not more than 10 minutes, okay? So I will give a very short introduction. This is the program, and then here is about G20. It is 60% of world population, 80% of global GDP and economy, and 75% of global international trade, okay? It consists of 19 countries and 1 group of countries, which is European Union. So you see of the country in 2 columns. At the left side, I put in white, and on the right hand, I put in yellow and green. I put in white colors, it is the US and their allies. Sometimes I said US is plural or singular. So there or its, because it's United States of America. So it must be their allies. And on the right-hand side, I distinguish between green and yellow. The green one are the countries member of BRICS or and non-alignment. Brazil, China, Brazil is BRICS, China BRICS, India at the same time BRICS and non-alignment, Indonesia non-alignment, Russia BRICS, Saudi Arabia non-alignment, South Africa at the same time BRICS and non-alignment. Argentina and Mexico, both of them are observer of non-alignment. Okay, so next. But if we look at the perspective in the future, 2030, 2050, this is the top 10 global economic size. I said size, not power, because power and size is not the same. So in 2030, this is the order from first to the last: China, USA, India, Japan, Indonesia, Russia, Germany, Brazil, Mexico, UK. 2050, China, India, USA, Indonesia, Brazil, Russia, Mexico, Japan, Germany, UK. And I put into 2 colors, green and yellow. The green one are BRICS and NAM, BRICS and non-alignment, which was in the past conceived by Sukarno as NEFO, new emerging forces. Okay, it was in the 60s. And then the yellow one is what Sukarno called old defaults, old established forces. So the question, since they will be together in G20, do they share the same vision of global future? That is the question. Do they have the same vision of global future? Here is what we hear the last few days. This is the vision of the US and their allies. The speech of Antony Blinken's few days ago in George Washington University. I will read it. A country with both the intent to reshape the international order and increasingly the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to do so. Beijing vision would move us away from the universal values that have sustained so much of the world's progress over the past 75 years. We don't seek to block China from its role as a major power, not to stop China or any country for that matter from growing their economy or advancing the interests of their people. But we will defend and strengthen the international law, agreements, principles, and institutions that maintain peace and security, protect the rights of individual and sovereign nations, and make it possible for all countries, including the United States and China, to coexist and cooperate. Even as President Putin's war continues, we will remain focused on the most serious long-term challenge to the international order, and that's posed by the People's Republic of China. So this is the speech of Antony Blinken's 2 days ago. Okay, now let's see. From China, this is from President Xi Jinping during the opening session of the BRICS Foreign Ministers meeting on 19th of May, so more or less 1 week ago. Here is his word. Peace and development remain the unchanging theme of the times. The aspiration of people across countries for a better life remains unchanged, and the historical mission for the international community to pursue solidarity and win-win cooperation remains unchanged. BRICS countries need to strengthen political, mutual trust and security cooperation, maintain close communication and coordination on major international and regional issues, accommodate each other's core interests and major concerns, respect each other's sovereignty, security and development interests, oppose hegemonism and power politics, reject Cold War mentality and bloc confrontation, and work together to build a global community of security for all. Facing the various risks and challenges of the day, it is more than ever important for emerging markets and developing countries to strengthen solidarity and cooperation. The 5 BRICS countries need to engage in dialogue and exchanges with more emerging markets and developing countries to increase mutual understanding and trust, tighten the bond of cooperation, and deepen the convergence of interest so as to make the pie of cooperation bigger and the force for progress stronger, and contribute still more to the lofty vision of building a community with a shared future for mankind. Okay? Now, so this I come to what Professor Mohanty called global rebalancing and global restructuring. So it seems clear for me, that the speech of Blinken shows the trend toward global rebalancing. What is global rebalancing? It means that economic growth within the international order set up and controlled by the US and their allies. As it was said by Blinken, we will not block the growth of China, but we will maintain international law, etc., etc. So it is economic growth is authorized within the international order set up and controlled by the US and their allies. While if we look at the speech of Xi Jinping, it is more toward global restructuring, which means an international order in favor of peace and development based on people's aspiration across countries, solidarity and win-win cooperation, dialogue and exchanges, mutual understanding and trust, a community with a shared future for mankind. I just quoted what Xi Jinping said in his speech. So this is the two contradictory trend which may adopted or by the member of G20. So who are behind these two aspirations? This what I call Western Galaxy and Bandung Constellation. What is Western Galaxy? I borrow from the astronomy, galaxy. Galaxy is a system. Western Galaxy is a system-based group, a group based on system united by the law of gravitation or dependency relation between center and periphery. The system I call capitalism, with its black hole, which is finance, with its center, which is the West, its peripheries, suns, planets, satellites, meteors, turning around within the orbit of the center. This is the rest of the world. And the other side I call Bandung Constellation. As you know, constellation doesn't exist materially. It is an imagination. Constellation is imagination. So it is diversity-based group of countries united by Bandung Spirit ideals, which is peaceful coexistence between humans and nature, liberation and independence from any kind of domination, equality between nations, peoples, genders, solidarity and empowerment toward the weak, and emancipation based on people's aspiration and sustainable perspective. So what will happen now? In G20, there are these two groups of aspiration. So here are some questions. Will those two global political orientation appear explicitly or implicitly in the G20 summit? Indonesia has decided to invite Ukraine. Will Putin and Zelensky meet in Indonesia? Zelensky has just declared that the war will end with diplomacy. What chance for negotiation? China has just taken over the BRICS presidency. What chance for BRICS consolidation and or expansion? While the ideal of non-aligned movement is appreciated outside non-alignment countries, the non-alignment countries remain silent on the crisis. What problem? US Asian Summit in USA. What impacts on China-US tension? Biden's tour in Asia. Is it consolidation of Western allies of Asia against China? And last, election of Marcos in the Philippines. Marcos Jr. is the son of the Marcos Sr., who was famous as dictator in 80s, in the 70s and 80s in Philippines, and Albanese in Australia. Albanese is from Labour Party, so he was succeeding from the Liberal Party power. So what is the perspective for Indo-Pacific alliances? So this is just non-exhaustive question. I suggest that every speaker pick one or the other of this question in order to limit in 10 minutes, and then we can discuss more in the second round. I hope it is okay. And I will invite Bukoni to speak first. Indonesia has decided to invite Ukraine to invite Ukraine. So what is motivation behind? Why? It is under pressure of the West, of course. But why? So Indonesia did not renounce to invite Putin, but Indonesia invite Zelensky, Ukraine. So this is one of the questions. Maybe Bukoni, you can have your view.
Okay, thank you so much, Pa Darwis, and everybody in the panels. Very nice to meet you again. I'm sorry for coming a bit late. Okay, so I think I'm going to just I don't know whether I have to answer your question first, or I just describe something.
You are free. I just give you question to give idea, but of course you have your own view. You have your own idea. There is no problem.
Okay, so what I think is we have to understand the tension between Russia and Ukraine is having the consequences of bringing European Union as the EU join the United States. And this is, of course, followed by the United States allies who punish Russia in severe sanctions, which is for me, I think it's about 4,000 or 5,000 kind of sanctions from the dog, trees, and everything, which is for me, some of them is contrary to the human rights or of course international protocol. So this global imbalance, global misalignment, and global inequity has to be ended. And I like the way you say it, and you divide between the galaxy and the non-galaxy one, because I think if we see from the game theory, this is going to be repeated imperfect information between American, NATO, Russia, which of course will even harm Ukraine. The main consideration is about whether you can join NATO or not join NATO, and how it's going to be ended. But again, talking about the non-alignment movement, we really have to think that around the 80s, the non-alignment country is engaged very well on the Iran-Iraq war dispute, the Afghan crisis, and the Cambodia conflict. And of course, we will be able to end the racism and apartheid in South Africa. So we've been to that sensitive and hard issues. So now the major transition is taking place in global geopolitics, which is of course, well, we think by the end of the communism collapse, then the world only leave one block, but it is not, because now we see that actually the Cold War is actually becoming more or ultra cold today. Because what? Because the multilateral countries carried out against Russia on the land of Ukraine and making Ukraine the country as a victims and who suffers the most. So I think on alignment movement, we have to think that on the various form of discrimination among the economic sanctions against Russia, so-called civilians, its connection with special military operation in Ukraine, I think it's very unfair because since the US and the alliances have never been given special sanctions to every wars they have created, including maybe Libya, Iraq, I don't know. No, for me that really shocks me is because if you see the Afghanistan today, we see all the news that the parents selling the girls as community, little girl to be a community to actually provide the family to eat. I don't know, and I wonder if the war of Ukraine and Russia will be long, because war in Europe is never ended very short. We see Russia-Sweden war is about 20 something years. German through no, not German, Spain through the Moors, 781 years. German to something is 500. I mean, it's all long war. So we have to really be prepared that Ukraine and Russia will be long as well. I like to us to remember the non-alignment movement Jakarta conference in 1992 that confirmed that despite the end of the Cold War, actually our struggle has to be continued. Today is the 93 days of the Russia-Ukraine armed conflict. The UN multilateral crisis management totally failed. Conflict management faces more major problems, and UN agencies are unable to prevent or provide solutions. We cannot have peace accords, ceasefire, and the US and West holding the crisis as hostage. So this is for me is like very confusing. It seems for me the US and the West is holding the crisis as hostage, and because of that, it's being part of the problem, not part of the solutions. And therefore, I think our non-alignment movement has to underline that whatever step we make, we are going to be part of the solution, not a part of the problem. And the US, the West political prescription of punishing, imposing sanction, isolating Russia, closing dialogue. This is very dangerous. Closing dialogue because I think about 400 diplomats of Russia is being, kicked out. It's not true. I think that's the step that actually not trying to reconcile Russia and Ukraine. And of course, this is very bad. So I think we have what we have to do as a non-alignment countries. We should make the bold calls to end all the discriminations against Russia with the various sanctions necessary on civilians imposed without any court decisions. Meaning, we have to open the dialogue. We cannot close any way of the dialogue. That's why for this, I just taking a picture of your question. I think I'm going to answer your questions number 3. Zelensky just declared the war will end with diplomacy. What chance for negotiation? What chance of negotiation if you close all the tools to open dialogue? Of course, we cannot have negotiation if we close the dialogue. And of course, the non-alignment countries should immediately make bold calls demanding that the same sanctions should be able to impose on the rich Americans who bringing impact to the Afghanistan, to Iraq, and others. If we keep thinking that way, so it's very dangerous, to treat Russia that way, because then we can ask the same thing to other countries. But for it, very importantly, we have to be consistent to contribute on the main non-alignment support need to strengthen the UN organizations, or I don't know what you call that, revolutionizing the United Nations, or reconstruct the United Nations, if not function as we expected. Reform? Okay. Yes, or reform. So now we have for the non-country or non-alignment country, we have to renew declarations. 1, advocating the equality and equal sovereignty over all countries, all people. 2, encourage friendly relation between countries. 3rd, meaning we cannot block anyone to talk. You cannot throw away diplomats. 3rd, advocating peaceful settlement in all international dispute. 4th, oppose the use of force, especially the using of the CBRNA, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive, and anywhere and any reasons we cannot allow that. And protect and save the entire human race. And I'd like to underline again, pushing any sanctions, especially about the wealthy Russians fund being freeze everywhere. It means that we have to be, to dare to say the same thing to other countries who did the war before. I mean, what's making Ukraine so special, and we can corner Russia this far? This is not fair for me. And we have to really underline what Putin and Xi meeting in the what do you call that, Beijing Olympic, and the result of the that they have the result of such a very close statement, which stated that the close relationship between China and Russia is actually the realization of those two countries as the last defense. Underline my word, the last defense that protects the new world order and the real balance of power. So just now, Pa Darwish, you showed me you're not calling it rebalance, but something else. So maybe we should change the name, but the meaning is we are not going to be not global rebalancing, but global restructuring. I think that's the right word. Because if you see your report just now, Indonesia is going to be number 4 in the world on what, 2030? Then maybe tomorrow is China. After China is Indonesia, because I think the unipolar doesn't want anybody to become B or tripolar. He wants to be exit alone, and this is we have to really I believe we have to go into global restructuring. So we have this is my last point. These three alliances that in Asia Pacific zone, the Australia, India, Japan, and the United States on the Quad, and then the Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom on September 2021, the Quad, the AUKUS, and the FPDS and the FPDA is something that can turn anything anytime to become like NATO when they are joined together. FPDA, the Quad, and the AUKUS. So we have to really think about it, because such hegemonic effort, which is going to pose a serious threat to global and regional peace, of course, especially regional peace, and the stability, undermine the stability of the world balance of order. So I think we really have to return of non-alignment movement core principle, which is continuing the NAM's opposition to the forms of military alliances, and then beyond non-alignment country must strongly oppose the model of the called supra war, which is a war between multilateral countries happening in one country against other countries, like what we see in Ukraine today, and calling for the resolution of dispute through negotiation instead of arrogance. And of course, we have to really emphasize we have to open dialogue, not closing dialogue like we have today. I think we really have to go to the build to build the world ague, like Sukarno famous speech on the United Nations. That through this speech, Sukarno underlined the importance of the new world order that is more fair. Then at that point, Sukarno said China is is very important country, and therefore Sukarno that time pushed China to be the UN Security Council, a part of the UN Security Council. I think that's my point, and hope is actually answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Bukoni. But you raised a question. For example, Zelensky yes. Said several times that I want to speak with Putin. I want to speak with Putin directly. But so far there's no meeting between Putin and Zelensky. Maybe I don't know if it will happen in Indonesia in November. We will see. We will see.
We are taking steps about it. I mean, not as a former Indonesians, but some people from Indonesia, academicians, executive, legislative. We are going to do something, and we'll hope by the G21. We call it now G21 because Ukraine is there. By the G21 or before the G21, President Jokowi will sit together with President Putin and President Zelensky. Now the problem, yes, but the problem is I just spoke to Ambassador of Russia to Indonesia, Madam Ludmila, and Her Excellency Ludmila said the problem is actually how to make sure that Putin trips will be secured, because something happened, Indonesia is going to have a very a special problem, and therefore what we have to think about.
Okay, so this is very good information that is off the record.
No, not off the record. This is open record.
Oh, really?
Of course we have to.
But I didn't have it. It's good that you said it. Thank you very much. So there's a plan about this, the coming or the dialogue between Zelensky and Putin. Okay, let's go now. The second speaker, Chiguang, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, because it is clearly targeted by Blinken, China as the enemy. It's that China is going to change the international order. It is clearly said in his speech. So what do you think?
Thank you very much, David. I think it is it's very timely right after Blinken's speech in Washington, University of Washington, and I think it is not unusual, or this is neither unusual nor the first time that the Americans or the global South has been trying to understand what is China and what is implication towards the global order. Although they claim it is universality, however, as we all know, it is a global order benefiting for the core of the global capitalist system. In fact, back in the 1990s, right after the triumphalist view of the winning of the West after the Cold War, Western scholarship has already begun to actively ask the questions such as why China is still a communist country, how long Chinese communism will last, and what will come after. What will come next after the fall of the inevitable fall of the Chinese Communist Party? Moving into the 21st century, with China steadily rising up to its current position of being the second largest economy in the world, questions turn into a more assertive statements, such as Blinken's one. In both public media and academic writings, Western-centric narratives claim that China will assume the position as the new global hegemon. It will destroy the old global system that has largely benefited the global South. No one is able to actually provide a definite answers to those questions or convincingly prove this claim. The overarching assumption behind this inquiry is actually, I want to point out, utterly Western-centric. A popular justification for failure to answer those questions coming from the 1990s scholars or today's American scholars are made popular by Henry Kissinger in his account on the rationale of Chinese foreign policy making. He quoted Liu Tianpai's word and states that China is a civilization pretending to be a nation state. Since China is only pretending to be a nation state, as the premises suggested, the contemporary social science theory have to recalibrate when applying the study of China. Another assumption that comes out from this premises that China is a civilization state is that it implies with China's rapid rise, it will inevitably become a new global hegemon, which will ignore the nation-state sovereignty and expand beyond borders. So China, by being a civilization state, is equally an empire. The assumption that China would become another empire or hegemon is rooted in the conventional Western-centric geopolitical understanding of the world. Contemporary international relations scholarship constantly reminds us the centrality of a Westphalian sovereignty. It is the result of the so-called awakening of the non-Western people, leading towards the diffusion of a Westphalian nationalism in a non-European world. And by using that framework, this narrative tries to understand the significance of the Afro-Asian solidarity movement since the 1950s and the emergence of the Afro-Asian Latin American countries after the long war against imperialism and colonialism. They merely state this is just another example of spreading of a Westphalian nationalism in the world. Consequently, the anti-imperial strive for unity of order and orientation beyond the Western-centric view of modernization is undervalued as a so-called Kantian moral solidarity in action with an attempt to sweep away evil from international society. So put it in a nutshell, in a simple world, the claim suggests that Afro-Asian solidarity is merely a dream, an ideal that cannot be possible in the universal world order largely dominated or solely dominated by the Westphalian view of national independence and sovereignty. Well, however, I want to emphasize that starting from the 1950s, marked by the Bandung Conference in particular, a different version of international order has been gradually growing. In the recent years, the prospect of this new version of international order, a more democratic one, a more equal one among states, is more likely to become a reality. China is part of the third world. China is never going to be a hegemon. Disagreements could be resolved through negotiation, interaction, and cooperation. Since the beginning of the PRC, the notion that the future global order should be hegemon-free and a democratic has been repeated, and democratic, a democratic one, has been repeatedly referred by the Chinese government. By Zhou Enlai on Bandung Conference in the 1950s, in his letter to the NAM in the 1960s, and in his report on the Fourth National People's Congress in 1975, in Deng Xiaoping's speech at the UN in 1974, in Jiang Zemin's speech in Cambridge in 1999, and most recently in Xi Jinping's talk on Boao Forum of Asia and many other occasions, including the 60 years anniversary speech of Bandung. How do we understand this non-hegemonic order? Why is it the only way forward for both the global South and the global North alike? Will China be another hegemon with its economic growth? Based on the premises that projects of anti-imperialism since the late 19th century, a diffusion of a Westphalian nationalism, the theory of hegemonic stability would then assume that the denial of one supranational hegemony would become the justification for the rise of another. This is the logic foundation for the Western-centric argument that China will become a hegemon. It also further assumes that only dominating by a hegemonic power could constitute the optimal situation for ensuring the maintaining of an open and a stable world economy. And this is another premises that sustains the argument that without a hegemon, or with the rise of a new power, the world will be in danger. After all, these are merely claims based on the premises that largely derived from a Eurocentric or Western-centric historical experience. The decline of one hegemon means confrontations and conflicts. The third aspect suggested by the hegemonic stability theory is the decline of one hegemon. In this case, in today's case, the decline of the US means confrontations and conflicts and will always lead to the rise of another. In this case, in Blinken's theory, that the decline of America will be a bad thing for the world order, for the benefits of the people, and consequently will be the rise of the evil China. Its underlying assumption is that the nationalist rise of a state will always lead to expansionism. It takes a Western-centric perspective and paints a teleological destiny of nations in the non-Western world, established during the wave of the anti-imperial national independence movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. In this teleological destiny, nationalism across the world will always repeat the European historical experience, leading to expansionist aggression, causing havoc to people and the world. A state will either strive to become a regional or a global hegemon and success, or being replaced under a dominance of a rising hegemon. And this assumption largely contributes to the rhetoric within the Afro-Asian solidarity movement that a big country within the movement will always be a threat to the other smaller country. However, the reality of Afro-Asian Latin American solidarity movement, particularly in the 1950s and 60s, spoke loudly against this assumption. History has proved that this hegemonic stability theory did not apply to the Afro-Asian Latin American world. For example, during his visit, what is the alternative then? So during the visit of the PRC in March 1975, Forbes Burnham, the then Prime Minister of the Cooperative Republic of Ghana, asked the Chinese Prime Minister Zhou Enlai why the PRC, as a crucial member of the Bandung Conference, did not join the non-aligned movement. Zhou's short reply was in two tiers. First, Zhou praised the joint effort of all participating members leading to the success of the conference. He considered the 5, later then 10 principles of peaceful coexistence as one of the most significant contribution of the conference to the world. The non-aligned movement, as Zhou suggested, is based on those principles, which aimed at national liberation, anti-imperialism, and anti-colonialism. Therefore, Joel argued, China, by devoting to the third world ongoing project of national liberation, anti-imperialism, and anti-colonialism, upheld the spirit of non-aligned movement without being its formal member. Here, I want to emphasize that this depicts first, the possibility of the future Afro-Asian Latin American solidarity movement alliances, and also the principle for the future global order. The first one is the future of the Afro-Asian Latin American solidarity movement should reside on the common goal of the unfinished project of anti-hegemonic global order, anti-imperialism global order. This should reside firmly on the nation building and national liberation. I want to re-emphasize that anti-imperialism, the antithesis of anti-imperialism, is liberation rather than hegemonic confrontation. I want to quote the sort of the reference, a speech, a line said by Guo in the closing remark at the Afro-Asian People's Solidarity Conference in 1956. The chairman of the Chinese, Guo was the chairman of the then Chinese delegations. He said, sincerely regards to the Egyptian people as they defeated the joint imperialist aggression. Guo quotes Mao's words and says, unity is power. The imperialists have a consistent policy of dividing us, hoping to conquer us one by one. Hence, we need to unite together. The final declaration of the conference of the Afro-Asian Solidarity Movement Conference takes the similar line and suggests the capability of solidarity and mutual support among the Afro-Asian people. It's key in defeating imperialist order and achieving perpetual peace on the world. Comparing to the hegemonic view, which sees the world space as an empty void being filled by dominant powers, the world order coming from the oppressed believes that the world space should be filled by the liberated people. The former believes that the global stability comes from the balance of powers, whereas the latter envisions a world federation formed by the autonomous people through acts of liberation. Here ends my contribution to today's discussion. Thank you. Dallas, you are inaudible.
Dallas, your mic is not open.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think there are a question related to China as a president of BRICS now. The question in G20, my question is that will the global political differences will appear in G20 summit, which is supposed to be a meeting of economic or financial affairs, looking for stability. But that's why I ask if these two groups I distinguish as a group of Western Galaxy and Bandung Constellation will appear in the G20 or not. This is a question. Now, let's listen to India. Rityusha, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Professor Kuduri. And
yes.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes. Sorry.
You can pick up the question or you have your own view. It's okay.
I'm going to address the central theme. What opportunities are there for BRICS and NAM? And we look at the current scenario of Ukraine-Russia crisis. So I'm going to kind of address that particular thematic. I feel
Yes.
that in the current context of the Ukraine-Russia crisis, the non-aligned movement is all the more relevant because it provides a strong base to an independent foreign policy to all its members. It provides that safe space to wield strategic autonomy while trying to create any kind of dialogue between Ukraine and Russia. And to bring in BRICS in this, the nature of both NAM and BRICS allows member countries to change the nature of power that we see right now unfolding in world politics, from a very traditional militaristic notion to the non-traditional notion of power, the people-centric notion of power, bringing them to the forefront of discussion on security, on war, on peace building, and thereby allowing a possibility of forging a different kind of power, a different kind of questions around sovereignty, leadership, and rights. So the current global crisis, the current issues that that we see, like terrorism or climate change, trade protectionism, and others, of course, the solution to those is something that NAM principles, as well as the principles of solidarity that BRICS has addressed to a large extent. And I think extending those values, extending those principles to a resolution for the current Ukraine-Russia crisis would be a great, opening up of dialogue. So from Southeast Asian countries to African countries, NAM and BRICS basically provide a platform for or a model of, Afro-Asian solidarity, cooperation, and also constructive negotiations when it comes to negotiating between global North and South. On every question, addressing political inequality, addressing economic inequality, without compromising the sovereignty of the Southeast Asian countries or Asian countries, or NAM and BRICS countries, as it were. So the ideals and the principles that these two organizations have, particularly NAM, the ideals of sovereignty, territorial integrity, non-interference, equality of nations, adhering to the sanctity of UN Charter, non-aggression, and peaceful coexistence, basically need to be extended, need to be extrapolated in this case of Russia-Ukraine crisis too. Bringing in a slightly nuanced, exclusivist, voice from the Indian perspective on NAM and BRICS, and making a small point there, I would simply say that there have often been comparisons of BRICS, the membership of India in BRICS, and the membership of India with other Western-led groupings such as Quad, and it is said that India's participation in BRICS or NAM is diluted because it is also a part of what is perceived as Western-led groupings such as Quad. I would say that India's participation in BRICS and NAM and Quad is, or it can be seen as a signal that all of these memberships appeal to a certain portion of domestic aspirations, showcasing India's commitment to keeping intact the strategic autonomy and also multi-aligned foreign policy. So there's been this emphasis on keeping the non-alignment as a recourse when there is a possibility of feeling pressure or feeling any kind of power asymmetry emanating from the superpowers. At the same time, there is a possibility of aligning in multiple directions, in multiple ways with different countries, and thereby exercising that choice of strategic autonomy. Now, that's a limited perspective from, looking at the case study of India, but enlarging the entire argument, or bringing back the argument of what NAM and BRICS countries can sort of give to the world at large. I think NAM particularly, as well as BRICS, give that kind of safe space, or if you will agree with my choice of words, a retreat. They allow the member states, like I'll give the example of India and China. They allow the member states like India and China to modulate whatever element of strategic rivalry or whatever element of contestation they might be facing at a particular point in time, within this setting of this either NAM or BRICS, even when their specific bilateral relations remain rocky or tricky. Groupings like BRICS, NAM, or SCO even afford both these member nations, India and China, the opportunity to decouple their strategic contest from other dimensions of the relationship, from other dimensions of their possible, coming together on larger forums. So this has been a very time-tested kind of formula through which both the sides have engaged with each other for more than 3 decades now. And there have been many points of very, precarious bilateral relations between India and China. At the same time, the retreat, the safe space that these groupings provide to both the countries to kind of decouple that particular tricky part and continue some sort of engagement with each other is one of the very important aspects of these organizations. And it is a good sign. There is a good sign that is provided to world politics at large, that such spaces of retreat or safe space could be utilized to even arbitrate in crisis which may not be pertaining to the member nations only. So here, Ukraine and Russia crisis, for instance, could be brought into this retreat or safe space, and without worrying about strategic autonomy being compromised or sovereignty of the countries who are allowing that kind of dialogue to happen here being compromised. So that's one possibility that NAM brings in. Also, I feel that both the groupings basically bring to fore the centrality of Afro-Asian solidarity. So the member nations in their foreign policy, if they are a member of these groupings, there is an element of centrality of Afro-Asian solidarity. And there is the pressure to cede to the demands of hegemonic powers, as the previous speaker was pointing out, is also lessened to a large extent. So these groupings provide a transcontinental reach to the member nations. And the presence in any of these organizations, NAM particularly, ensures a very strong international base for participation. So I feel that the signaling that goes, from NAM and BRICS continues to then challenge the international system, which does not recognize the global South's economic and political, presence, economic and political requirements, demands, and issues, and therefore consistently propels for a reform of the international multilateral architecture. And these are the key political issues for which both the NAM and BRICS are fighting continuously. So in keeping with these kind of ideals, these kind of demands from NAM and BRICS countries, I think this platform is perhaps the best suited platform to bring to fore the issues of global South, bring to fore the issues of equity and justice in global politics. So even in the current crisis, I feel that NAM should take a lead, in fact, in terms of arbitrating in this crisis. I'll rest my thoughts here, and I'll look forward to more discussion on these issues. Thank you for having me over.
Thank you, Yusha. Yes, the requests of the world, or some people, about the role of NAM in this crisis, but in the eyes of the West, I don't know if NAM is credible. That is the question. So it's very, very interesting. Of course, as I said here, I wrote here, while the ideal of NAM is appreciated outside NAM countries, the NAM countries remain silent on the crisis. I mean, we don't hear what the declaration from NAM, the statement, or the stand of NAM, etc., etc. So, well, we have, of course, goodwill, good things, as you said, but what really happened inside NAM, we don't know exactly. under the presidency of Azerbaijan at the moment. Okay, so this is just a question, remark and question. Now, let's go to South Africa. Sifamandla, are you there? No? Sifamandla from University of Johannesburg. No.
I
Okay.
didn't see him.
So let's go to Moscow. Elena, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay.
Hello. I want to say that, Darwin, thank you very much for your beginning of this conference. Very original, no, such interesting, and I support your idea. So to give some questions to show that the problem is between West project and we can say anti-West project, where China now considers as the main country. Yes. No, if almost all people consider that it is the most important to do reforms to change this world order, I want to remind that the most important to have adequate economic mechanism which can help us to government by global economy, that global economy will go away from global crisis and will work for people needs for the best future. It is the most important today, the question. And if to consider the West project, the economic mechanism is very simple. And we know that all the period, we had some cycles of economic policy of states, and cycle was liberalism, then protectionism, and then the war. The war, it is the instrument to decide of problems of global crisis. And when somebody can say that Russia wants the war or Ukraine wants the war, it is not true. Oligarchs, their ideologists, they know that they have no any other way from this very terrible global crisis. Only one instrument can help them to organize a third world war. And if you will remember Engels, who said in comments to Capital of Marx, he said that periods between wars will be more and more longer, but catastrophe after this war will be more and more bigger. We know First World War, Second World War, and now the West is trying, and we can't say that they are bad or good. It is their practical need. They have no any other exit from this global crisis. So, of course, they can speak about green new course. It is very important for them because capitalism, which oriented on the criteria of profit, does not want to think about ecology. We have now a lot of ecological problems thanks to such industrialization and according to motivation of profit. And they are trying to solve these problems through that they had done limitations for some technologies. And of course, these limitations, again, will concern developing countries. So the idea of new green course is, again, to do difference between developed and developing countries, more bigger, and so on. Pandemia had done very good step in the sense that people who live in developing countries became more and more poor. The same idea is from this war, which we can see Ukraine and Russia. We can receive the problem with food. And it is okay for the West project because less people is better for their ideas. So I want to remind about the role of USSR in Russia. I want to say that Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia were the whole country and with other republics without any problems and contradictions between us. And moreover, Belarus and Ukraine, we consider them as the most scientific technological countries, developed electronic machines, very famous mathematicians, physics, medical professors. They are from these two republics. And from St. Petersburg and Moscow, of course, too, but these republics had a very great tempo of growth, and cultural in our republics was very high. I want to say that it is very important to know that only thanks to our Soviet planning of economy, which is absolutely different from all models of planning in all countries of the world, we could achieve such very strong industrialization. We could be the winners in the Second World War, and we became the country which could define tendencies of development of bipolar world. And the Soviet Union was only one country which, as China today, was in a position to the West project. But what happened? Having different reasons, I can say about the most important. And the first of them, that to government by such big country where connections between producers are very complicated, we can't do proper balance how to develop economy using only a primitive technique. We needed to automatize our calculations of balance. We needed to create automatization system of government. And advisors of Kennedy in that period, in the beginning of 60s years, they said, if Russia will create this automatization system, USA will be losers in the Cold War. And we don't know how they work, but some part of our nomenclature, they blocked process of automatization of government, and they preferred to speak about problems, but not to decide these problems. Very serious mistakes where we had in our country, which had done such situation which we have now. And these mistakes came from Khrushchev when he decided to divide budget of the USSR to give significantly more money to republics. Republics received money to develop national culture. What I can say honestly, that, for example, my family lived in Ukraine, then they came to Belarus to create Minsk tractor factory, and nobody thought that Ukraine and Belarus are different. We thought that it is the same country where everybody spoke in Russian and thought about technological development of our countries, republics. But when Khrushchev gave a lot of money to budgets, we felt that we received Belarusian nationalism as some small tendency. In Ukraine, it was more deeper. And all policy of our Communist Party, it had such orienting to do nationalism more bigger. So we began to destroy our country by reforms. What reforms? I hate this word, if to be honest, because under this beautiful words, freedom, we can find that it will be some chaos, economic chaos, which always wealth oligarchs use for their profit. Thanks to international monetary system, thanks to different monetary instruments, they have no any interest how to connect industrial connections to create anti-crisis, to create proportional development of economy. They are not interested by this problem, which tried to decide only one country, our Soviet Union. And what we can see then, after the Cold War, according to Soviet Union, we became usual capitalist country, peripheria, and we began to destroy our industry. All our reforms had done that we became technologically dependent from the West. I'm sure that clever people such as Blinken, they had created very interesting strategy how then, after Cold War with Russia, Soviet Union, to create Russia absolutely dependent technologically. And then it will be very nice to take this weak country to some military provocation, and it will be the beginning of the Third World War. And of course, our people, they hate fascism. It is something as in blood. And when it was explained to our people that Ukraine, and we could see that Ukraine, yes, we saw on TV how Ukrainians, Nazis had so much march, and Ukrainian people were very changed for these years during Perestroika. I don't know why they hated so much Russians, because I can't say that Russians had the same feelings to Ukrainians. Now, maybe, and now I can't say that Russians hate Ukrainians. It's not true. Why the war began, the question? As it was explained to people, because it was dangerous that Ukraine, where the West supplies her by their advisors, and we know now that a lot of advisors from the West came to Ukraine to help her to have a war with Russia. Before, maybe 8 years, they prepared Ukraine to this war, something as the West and the East will have this war, as the war between Ukraine, pro-West, Ukraine has West-orienters and Russians. And when people understood that it will be the war against fascism, of course, we received people who decided to go to this war by their own will. And now we have no such special army, which knows that army will go to Ukraine. As usual, people who decided to win fascism. But I don't know what was the aim of the West. But when the West helps to Ukraine with a lot of money, with a lot of weapons, I want to say that their aim to beat more and more, to kill and Ukrainians and Russians together, and to destroy this territory as it is possible. Because if the West had no any influence for Ukraine, I can say that maybe it could be such situation that no, at first it could not be fascism in Ukraine, and the second, if Russia, for example, will come, Ukrainian people should say, oh, our friends, our brothers came. But everything was created to do Ukrainian people as enemies to Russians. So it is a very bad situation that the war now continues. I don't know, it is difficult to predict when it will be finished. What I can see is that maybe the West today can't destroy Russia totally, because thanks to the Soviet Union, Russia has very strong weapons, maybe the most strongest in the world. So the West can go something back, that then to have new, after some period, the West will come back with new military actions. And maybe again, between Ukraine and Russia, maybe Taiwan and China, they're very interested by this region too, because this war should be significantly more bigger than it was in Europe. And what I can see that now Europe, thanks to propaganda, they began, something is ready to accept very bad situation in their life, that prices are going up and the future of ordinary people is not so nice in Europe. Will be a lot of problems because the West oligarchs, they have requests that Russia should be absolutely under sanctions, no oil from Russia, maybe no food from Russia. And of course, Africa will have problems and the West will have problems. And it doesn't matter, people maybe will be happy to be patient to this situation because the reason is Putin is Russia. It is very primitive, such thoughts about situation. But situation, the answer is only one, that the West can't live without the Third World War. They need, and they will do everything to destroy all countries. The question number two, how we can go away from this very terrible situation by peaceful measures. Only one way, not to speak about reforms. All reforms we see doing the situation in the world more and more worse. All speakers about freedom, nothing. The problem is how to govern by economy. Economy can't hear our words. Economy needs special economic mechanism. And only one country in the world created this mechanism. It was Soviet Union. And I want to say, if we could be with China in 50 years together without this Khrushchev's behavior about Stalin and so on, the West project would be finished in 50 years. But it is a pity that Russia and China became enemies for some period. Now they came back something together. But again, I want to say that China have the biggest respect to industry which they have. But the main problem now is not industry. The problem is how to manage by industry, how to develop economy proportional to the better life of people, how to eliminate this chaos, economic chaos, which is very useful to the West. And my opinion that if we will understand the importance of artificial intelligence to government by economy, not artificial intelligence to government by people, what want to do the West after this World War #3. I'm sure these ideas of Schwab, how to do totalitarian artificial agent, intelligence who will government by people, it is an idea, it is the end of history of the mankind. And and at first, such idea said Norbert Wiener, very famous scientist who created cybernetics. He said, only two ways for mankind. Or we will go by the way when people with middle knowledge will be not interested. They will have very bad life because robots will do all work, will do such work. And this world will need only very, very genuine people, and all others will be unhappy. Or Norbert Wiener said, it will be another way for realization of moral principles. And I want to say Bandung Spirit's principles are moral principles. And in all both cases, we should use cybernetics. We should use this technological progress in digitalization. But how to use? What program should be? And I want to say algorithms which created Soviet Union, and we have such a dynamic model how to coordinate activities of different countries that as orchestra we could go ahead to the better life of people. We can do this if we will understand the people, our problems today, very serious problems. We have no right to lose our time. And we should understand that this artificial intelligence, he will take all routine work to create balance for himself, but decisions will do people. So what this artificial intelligence, or she will be something as the base for the real democracy and freedom of people, without this empty talks of Soros and so on, very rich people who know how to do money more for them. And they, in my opinion, they hate all other people, and they going by the way which Norbert Wiener said, first way. And Soros had in this Davos, what today, what recently was forum in Davos, where he said, yes, our hopes are for intelligent artificial, which will control people. He said about this. It isn't democracy and freedom, no. So I will finish my speech that if we want to change the world to the better life of people, if we want to unite the countries, developing countries and progressive people from the West together, we should understand the role of this digital revolution, that she can change the world in different directions. And now it is very important, to my opinion, to organize something as teaching of ideas of Soviet planning of economy with back connection from enterprises according to our needs of consumers, how we created these iterations and how we could turn economy in our vision direction. It is very important. It is the best what Soviet Union had done for his existence. And the most interesting that now I receive different letters, for example, from Umeå University in Sweden, where the whole group is interested by Gasplan's work, because they understand that it was only one practice in the world which was in the position to practice of the West, which always finished by the biggest world war. And I want to say that people gave me very interesting questions, in the sense that they are trying to understand our practice very deeply. But of course, in our country, in Russia, it is a pity. Again, we can hear that no Gazprom, no, we are in modern economy, we have market, and now people, they died in this special operation. But our government, what recently, and our former president Medvedev, they said we are not going to change our economic rules. We will continue to live in the modern economy. This economy, market, the name is market economy, primitive name, had done us absolutely technologically dependent from the West. And yes. I don't know. So sorry, I will finish.
Yes, I think there are several interesting points. I catch, for example, the transformation of Russia or Soviet Union from autonomous state to be in the orbit, turning around the orbit of Western galaxy and become the periphery of Western galaxy, yes, and dependent, yes. dependent of the West, etc. And also, I think essentially you propose that to promote peace through economic planning. That is your main proposal, I think. And then we get into the detail of technical aspect of economic planning, like cybernetics, algorithm, etc., that you know very well because you are cybernetician, as you said. So let's go to the next speaker now from outside NAM and BRICS. The first from Greece, Dimitris, are you still there?
I am here.
Yeah, okay. What is your comment, your view, or your question to the previous speakers, or you have your own view? Please go ahead. But if you can respect your ancestor Agora. But of course, Agora is 6 minutes. You can go until 10 minutes if you wish.
No, I think I need quite less. I have explained in our previous meeting my main ideas, and they remain the same. Irrespective of the position one would take on the details of the Ukrainian conflict, the fact is that the West has responded to the Russian military intervention by launching a kind of sui generis world war. It's a world war because of the extent of the measures taken against Russia, of their global effect, and it is a sui generis world war because for the time being there is no direct conflict between NATO and Russian troops, which most probably would lead to the annihilation of humanity. Still, this situation has three consequences, potential probable consequences, which are hardly understood, because we are very conservative beings. We make different meetings like this one and others. We write articles, but we don't really have the sense of the urgency of the situation, and everybody is repeating various things which may be correct or not correct, but they do not correspond to the gravity of the situation. If, for example, imagine that some of us would face a threat to the life of their beloved persons, what they would do? They would move, they would mobilize themselves, they would do many things. Now we are at best, we are describing just coldly a process which may lead to the end of the human race. Why it may lead? First, because the situation has sharply increased the danger of a nuclear conflict, or a conflict with other means of mass destruction, like bioweapons, chemical weapons, cyber weapons, space weapons, and I don't know. We are always speaking about weapons here, and not many ideas. Sometimes I would say even from the so-called anti-war camp, as Elena told before, as even the fact we have to speak of an anti-West camp is also an indirect acceptance that we disagree with many things the West is doing, or it is proposing, or its vision, if you wish, but we are lacking a coherent and serious alternative vision. Now, except the danger of annihilation by nuclear arms, there is a very the perspective of the near certainty of annihilation by the climatic crisis. And even before the Ukrainian war, nearly all governments on the planet, they were doing the usual trick. They were admitting the danger of climatic change, and they did not do anything because they preferred to to satisfy particular interests, fossil fuel industries, etc., etc. By the way, this is a problem which cannot be solved by one country or one group of countries alone, because it needs a radical changes in the mode of production, in the mode of distribution, and in the human culture and civilization. No one country or group of countries will do such things if it fears that other groups will profit or other countries will profit from them. We have to move all together, otherwise we will not move at all. According to the scientific data of worked out by the IPCC, which is the scientific, so to say, committee created by the General Assembly of the United Nations, we have only some years in order to try to reverse climatic change. If we don't act now because of the properties of the phenomenon, it will become irreversible. Whatever we are doing afterwards, it will not have any effect. The Earth will enter a different climatic trajectory, and which will be hardly possible to will make hardly viable the existence of superior forms of life on the planet. You know, to understand where we are, it is the Earth's climate is in an unstable equilibrium. In physics, there are three kinds. In mechanics, there are three kinds of equilibriums. There is the direct, the stable, the unstable, and the indifferent. The climate of the Earth is in an unstable equilibrium. It is like a ball on a hill. If you push it too much, it will go down, and you will not be able to catch it and to bring it to the top of the hill. So if the situation around Ukraine is continuing, it will make certain the destruction of Earth's climate. And the third thing, which we are already seeing, is that we have a huge economic and social crisis in the whole world as a result of the war, of the sanctions, and of the anti-sanctions, and so on and so forth. I don't say that all those phenomena are due to the Ukrainian crisis. There are other also deep systemic factors which are creating them, but the Ukrainian crisis came to, and especially what I call the sui generis war of the West against Russia, of the collective West or of NATO, whatever you want, against Russia, has led all those problems to a paroxysm. A fourth also consequence will be that we will go to very undemocratic and fascist even solutions because of the social and economic crisis. Either we will have even in the West, how they will handle the situation. Now, those are the reasons we must move to stop this situation. And I explained to our previous meeting why I consider the non-aligned movement, the non-aligned countries rather, somehow the privileged actors which could take an initiative. Now, the problem is, as Darwish has stated, that we don't see the non-aligned countries understand this or wishing to go to the forefront. And I said in my previous in our previous meeting, and also in an article which probably you are familiar with, or some of you, which I wrote on the basis of the ideas I explained in our last meeting, that now the non-aligned countries represent a huge part of the world economy, of the world population, and of the world armaments, so to say. But this is an objective reality. There is a difference because in the beginning, when the non-aligned movement began, you had personalities like Tito, like Nehru, like Castro. I mean, there was an emancipatory and a social dynamic behind this movement. And now I'm afraid that most of those governments are a little bit too conservative. And in the same time, so they prefer to keep the best of their relations with United States and the Western centers without alienating also from the new ascending centers like Russia or China. But we don't go very far away with this conservatism. I hope that maybe Lula will be elected as president of Brazil, and I hope also that as president of Brazil, he will not follow the tradition of leftist leaders who are too easily compromising with imperialism. And so we will have a center in Latin America, because there must be a connection. I mean, there must be also the social, the emancipatory element in order to move. And for the same reason, I think we must think how we can also help this procedure, because only to wait from governments to do it, it will not get us very far. So we have to think and discuss between ourselves if we cannot make a kind of a new international, like my friend Samir Amin wanted to create, or Chavez before him, and so on and so forth, but an international which will not begin from elaborating a new program, but from the need to stop this world war which the West has begun against Russia, and try to, I mean, I imagine a process which will remind us of what happened in the beginning of the First World War with the Zimmerwald Conference, and then with Kendal and Stockholm conferences, which led to the Russian Revolution and to the Third International. Of course, all those things are mutandis mutandis, we are in a very different situation. I don't speak about a mechanical, but now it is imperative to try to create a huge international movement to stop arming Ukraine, to stop the sanctions and counter sanctions, and to work for a peaceful solution of the Ukrainian conflict. On these three points, we must try to create an international movement, which is the necessary supplement to whatever the governments will do, because the governments have their own priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitris. It is very important you speak about the role, expected role of non-aligned movement, as you wrote in your article that I read well. And you are right that there is a lack of leadership. I mean, there are several generations of NAM leaders. The first generation, of course, is the founders, including, of course, Tito, Nasser, Nehru, Sukarno, Nkrumah, Castro. And then the second generation, what is the successor of Ben Bella, Boumediene, etc. But the third generation, nothing. There is no third generation of leadership in my view on non-aligned movement. And we do not hear the voice of non-alignment. Of course, ritually, every 2 years, they make a summit and declaration, and they always attach to the Bandung Spirit principles, etc., etc. But inside NAM itself, there are a lot of divergence. And of course, NAM, non-aligned movement, always diverse since the beginning. Bandung Conference are diverse. But there are leaderships who were able to keep united. But now there is no real leadership who can keep united and to declare or to pronounce their voice. That's the problem. And you suggest that maybe Lula, but let's say that we need several leaders, not only one person, of course. That's I think my remark on your view. Now let's go.
Very, very interesting. Permit me to make only one remark. We need also, this is the new idea I have from our last meeting. We need also to create an independent, a social, something to be able to so to say, to something not dependent upon governments and states and power, which may influence them, may cooperate with them, but it will be fundamentally independent, because otherwise we will not do much.
Yeah. That's what has been tried by like World Social Forum, for example. One of the architects, of course, Samir Amin, Chico Whittaker, etc., etc. But now it's a kind of also deadlock. I mean, where is they going? The World Social Forum, no voice anymore. So that's the crisis. Real. There is a crisis of leadership, I think, and in this case, I think BRICS is relatively the main leadership that we can rely on. That's why I propose this, maybe BRICS and NAM, but we are from outside. I mean, we are not of the government. We are not of the representative of the state, etc. We are just academic, intellectual, scholars, activists. We try to give recommendation. That's why we will formulate recommendation for our in our conference Bandung-Belgrade-HAVANA in Indonesia in next November, to be submitted to the government of Indonesia, of BRICS, and of NAM. That's our ideas.
But Darwish, sorry again. We don't have much time, so we must do whatever we can even before November. Because from now to November is 5 months. Let's take what initiative we can take until then, because I'm afraid we don't have so much time.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with you. Now let's go to the next. Grażong from Poland.
Yes. Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
And
try to focus on one issues or of the.
Yes, I want to focus on 4 maybe aspects related to your questions.
Yeah.
The first one, of course, is about the end of the war in Ukraine, and we should be sure that the war will end where in the moment when we will be created a new order, new agreements, new institutions, and new values. It would end the war on a global scale, and the part of this global rivalries, local, regional conflict in Ukraine. But now it continues with what you, Darvis, characterize as global rebalancing or global restructuring. What I described 6 years earlier as a struggle between Eurasianism and Euro-Atlantism as ideal types of antagonistic trends. I have on my mind. I had on my mind the same difference and antagonistic division. During my speech, I want to share with you my point of view on 3 moments related to the issue of our meeting. And the first is connected with Poland, of course, and for sure Poland is one of 4 tools of global rebalancing strategy. I think we can we can name this as at the north of Europe. This part of this strategy is Sweden, Finland, ambitions to be a part of NATO. In south of Europe and West Asia, and there are some attitudes that there could be an Israel-Turkey, some kind of connecting their strategies. In Asia, of course, it is AUKUS, and the fourth is in the Central Europe, Poland, Baltic states, and Ukraine as important tool of rebalancing strategy. And let me say something about the role of Poland in Ukraine conflict. Warsaw is among the leaders in providing support to Ukraine, being the largest logistic hub for Western military assistance to Kyiv and sending into Ukraine soldiers of fortune. It cost Poland 7 billion zlotys. It is about 1,050 million dollars from the 24 February till now. So it is big money. The loudest calls to impose anti-Russian sanctions came also from Poland. In confirmation of its commitment to its position, Poland terminated the gas supply agreement with Gazprom ahead of schedule and pretended that it does not need Russian natural gas at all. Poland cannot find an alternative to Russian gas, in fact, and now we receive it, but as reversed away from Germany. With gains come also to go also to the Berlin, which lead to a sharp increase in prices for this fuel in Polish economy. And important and very strategical from the point of view of Warsaw is a project of common state of Ukraine and Poland, which are in ongoing processes implemented according to the idea described by Noam Chomsky, manufacturing constant, yes, because there are no real discussion among the Polish people. Is it good or not? There are only one good way, and our governance goes in that without alternative way to be a partner of Ukraine and against Russia. During the visit of Polish President Duda a few days ago in Kiev, the Ukrainian President Zelensky announced a bill that equate the rights poles with Ukrainians in Ukraine, giving them the same rights except for the right to vote in Ukrainian nations-wide elections. That is not enough for Warsaw to take control of territories of Ukraine, but to develop the strong sphere of influence there. Kiev has also permitted Polish citizens to occupy top official positions in Ukraine and fill in the local power structures with its appointees, and to get full clearance for getting a highly sensitive classified Ukraine state information, and to introduce Polish advisors and specialists in all spheres of governmental, administrative, economic, financial, and military structures. So it is a process of building new political beings, exactly. The Poles are pushing NATO to send a peacekeeping contingents to Ukraine equipped with heavy weapons, unlike normal peacekeepers sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council. But there are some analyses highlight that Poland aim is the direct annexation of Western Ukraine territories and their incorporation into Polish Republic. I think that it is not like that. I think that probably the main reason of this Polish activity is not about Polish aspiration to seize Western Ukraine exactly, but about expanding the combat zone and chaos to another country, which are the part of American geostrategy in the region. And to legitimate this inside the Polish nation, there are many political and ideological phenomena created in last weeks. For instance, the Prime Minister of Poland, Mateusz Morawiecki, in British newspaper Daily Telegraph, is urging for a global crusade against the Russian wars. So it is not only about to help Ukraine against the Russia so-called invasion as a state, but it is about the Russian civilizational specificity, and that means it is connected not only in rivalry of states or even powers, but there are somewhere there at the end of the day there are confrontation of ideas. So it is very probably the thesis that Russia is not only enemy in geopolitical or economical sense, but as a possible creator of alternative ideas and ways to go forward to be alternative for a great reset, the corporationist narration which we are observed now among the Davos leaders and corporations and so on. But the Poland Prime Minister was the first which openly talk this language of crusaders, yes, of crusaders. Another very bad and dangerous fact was that the Russian ambassador in Poland, Mr. Andreev, is those in red paint by Ukrainian women working for George Soros Foundation, and she was not even questioned by the police. She went out to another country, and Polish prime governor or minister of internal problems didn't criticize this element, which of course is against the diplomacy law, and it is very dangerous moment. As in response, there are claims in Russia Duma that Poland will be next for denazification after the Ukraine. The Ramzan Kadyrov, leader of Chechnya, openly told that the Ukrainian as a problem are not on the table, but it is a Poland. Of course, probably it is a part of informational struggle, but we are observing ongoing process of rivalry, and it is dangerous scenario for the future. And from the global powers, especially United States and very active Great Britain in our region, from my perspective, means that they want to develop a sphere of chaos also in Poland territory somehow. Of course, the participation of Polish military contingent, which is also analyzed in Russia, in Poland, and in Polish-Ukrainian relations, in hostilities on the side of Ukraine, on the Ukrainian soil, will inevitably lead to Russian retaliatory military strikes, and that the argue that Great Britain are a main factor behind this kind of building antagonism between Poland, but especially Poland, Ukraine, and with Russia. That Boris Johnson a few days ago openly talked about new alliance which we built next to European Union, which include Baltic states, Poland, Ukraine, and with possibility of membership in future by Turkey. I think it is worth to consider the role of Turkey now, because we could find many arguments that Turkey are more and more going against the West and try to build their own geopolitical code. But somehow it could be also observed that it is also very dangerous for Russia tactics. I think a few days ago, the Turkey highlighted they want to develop new operation in Syria, and generally, when we speak about this aspect of war in Ukraine, I think that we observe actualization of geopolitical strategy of Mackinder, very known geopoliticians from Great Britain, which lived 100 years ago, how to divide Eurasia between East and West in the interest of Anglo-Saxon world. So there will be no end of war, diplomacy and meeting Putin and Zelensky in G20, I think, but more fields of rivalry with quite possible participation of Poland. But what is important in relation of ideas which we are speaking about, non-enlightenment movements or critics of imperialism, I have analyzed today the interview with Deputy Governor of Kherson region, which highlight the three ideas as a base of his world view. I put the link in our discussion. It is unfortunately in Poland, but it is of course a source of knowledge. And he said that the activity and people in Kherson, which are now controlled by Russia forces, is the Che Guevara ideas to fight against oppression of oligarchy and capitalism, but also Gandhi ideas he highlighted, because now it is time to administrative tools to develop the quality of life and not use force. And finally, he talked about Slavonic ideas, which gather three Eastern Slavic nations, Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Russia, as a one nation called Ruski. Not I don't know how it differentiates in English, but in Russian are the two words. Rossiyski, it means citizenship of Russia, and Ruski, it means ethnicity, and Ruski Человек, Ruski Mir, Russian word. And the basis of Slavic idea is a justice. It's a justice, and he assured that the operation, Russian operation, must take into account all territory of Ukraine to defend all presence of fascism and oligarchist and Western control politicians and oligarchs. And now I want to shortly come to the second moment connected with BRICS. I think that in this situation, what it should be done, it should be highlighted and developed under the BRICS institution. I think that in addition to economic cooperation, in the context of ongoing war in Ukraine and generally related to the change of international order, it is, I see the necessity to launch the BRICS TV with informational programs to build. I know this institution already exists, but I think it should be developed. The statute based on BRIC principles and an additional board consisting of these countries will open the field for the dissemination of the point of view of these countries. And as you remember, maybe it refers to the idea of new informational order from the early 70s of 20th century. This is not very timely because undoubtedly Russia is in a weaker position in the informational rivalry, while in a common BRICS message will ensure objectivity and above all legitimacy of real pluralism, because we now observe also development and strong factor of informational warfare, which with high tools and finance at the side of the West. Yes, because and it is related with my third point, which I want to highlight about non-alignment movement and the answer to the question why non-alignment movement is silent about the crisis. I think we should consider that what importance have that Bandung's ideas were conceived during the dominance of the nation state and territory-centered thinking analysis. But in the last decades, 2 decades especially, there are big transformation of society, of civilization, based on transnational network society, which has emerged as a new form. At the time, there is an ongoing power struggle between global capitalist powers and corporations over its control. Moving from the abstract to concrete, it is related to the building strong networks of non-governmental organizations, foundations, and sometimes religious forces, for instance, Fethullah Gulen, networks in Turkey, which are founded and formed according to the intellectual codes that are often a tool for weakening governments resistant to globalism. And because when we are using the categories built in a different context, civilizational context, for many peoples, also in the third war or non-alignment movement, it seems that yes, Russia started this war, and Ukraine have a border, is independent, have a formal sovereignty, and so on. And I want to add another important idea, which should be we work for to conceptualize. I think it is a concept of concept of agent of globalism. Of course, agent of imperialism, of globalism, as a concept, as an intellectual construct, which gather types of ideas, politics and cultural or economical activities that threaten the values mentioned by the non-aligned movement: peace, solidarity, independence. But it should be reconstructed because of these new possibilities and differences and divisions created by deterritorialization in the network society. And that's all for now. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Grajan. So you have 3 points very relevant, especially about the role of BRICS and the need for new information. I mean, the BRICS has to set up a kind of information agency in order to compete with the Western mainstream media. That's true that media is a tool of competition or a tool of domination. As Samir Amin rightly stated that there are 5 tools used by the West to dominate the world. First, science and technology. Second, information, communication, media. Third, financial system. Fourth, the mass destructive armament. And the fifth is the control over access to natural resources. That's so media is true. It's very important. I live in France and I do not hear at all the news which is different from the mainstream, except when I access to African media, Media Africa, etc. That then I listen diversity of views on the war.
Let me add, Jarvis, let me add, because I think that because information is inside the Samir Amin's content, but the 6 should be tools of network society.
Yeah.
Tools of network society as a new important tool which was built thanks to the objective development of civilization in the last decades. It is a strong tool. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So now let's go to Hungary. Anna Maria, are you ready?
Yes, thank you. Do you hear me?
You can present your view.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I would like to raise some views within the framework of the problematic how the global South has challenged imperialism. So we are living in the age of the unipolar, hegemonic, transnational monopoly capitalism, or as it is called by Samir Amin, the collective imperialism led by the United States, European Union, and Japan by the Triad. The global imperialist center of the capitalist world order is highly integrated and organized, much more than the global periphery, which it has exploited for centuries. However, the things are changing. In the last decades, the Communist Party-led China has shown a remarkable socioeconomic and technological development, as we know, and expanded its international relation network of its international relations, mostly within the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. Today, China has 24 partnership agreements with major regional organizations and with 78 countries. Most of them are members of the non-aligned movement. China is a more significant partner to the countries in the global South than is the United States. China is also an active member of the BRICS, which represents more than a third of the world economy. BRICS has deepened its intra-groups cooperation in the last decade and become attractive to many countries: Indonesia, Turkey, Mexico, Argentina, members of the G20, and many other countries have expressed their willingness to join BRICS. On its recent online meeting, the BRICS group has expressed its will to expand, saying that the current G7 members could enjoy a priority in joining. It is important to note that if Turkey becomes a member, the military power of BRICS would also increase meaningfully. Turkey is opposing Sweden and Finland to join NATO, as we know, and by doing so, it hinders the escalation of the conflict to a third world war, also for a reason that we should not greet at all. These and other events reflect the strengthening of the ties within the Global South on the one hand, and the weakening of the US-led imperialism on the other. It is also apparent that the countries of the Global South are increasingly reluctant to serve the interests of the imperialist center. 40 countries voted against or abstained from voting for the condemnation of Russia in the United Nations in connection with the Ukrainian attack. And 32 out of these 40 countries are members of NAM, representing almost 4 billion people. The Global South, 85% of the world population, has not joined the sanctions imposed on Russia. What is more, they have begun adjusting themselves to the new situation. Some examples. Russia has intensified its trade connections with the Global South. BRICS, Saudi Arabia, and other developing countries have challenged the supremacy of the US dollar by launching their own payment systems. China is accelerating its technological innovation and ready to share the results with other countries. The network of media and NGOs we have just discussed are still unbelievable strong pillars of imperialism. However, the sanctions imposed by the West on Russia and China have forced these countries to develop their own media networks. Other countries of the Global South are also taking steps in this direction. So my conclusion number one here is that as we see a process of the linking expression by Simon, I mean, from the global, the linking from the global imperialist center is unfolding and forced to be accelerated by the most recent sanctions against Russia. This is a good news, since, as Amin claimed, the linking is the precondition of any indigenous, pro-people, and eventually socialist development of any country. The control over the resources of the humankind can only be democratized, and the world can only be multi or pluripolar if the imperialist center is defeated economically, politically, culturally, technologically, ideologically. However, imperialism will not give up peacefully as we see it today in the Ukrainian conflict. Imperialism is ready to sacrifice financial, economic, technological, cultural connections, people, and the nature, the whole world, if its hegemonic power is at stake. So my conclusion number two, imperialism cannot be overcome if it is not defeated militarily as well. China doesn't have a military technique equal to that of the United States, and it is not eager to fight to any countries. It is Russia that can compete with the US in this field and is ready to do that. And Russia enjoys the sympathy of the Global South, as mentioned earlier. Iran's approach to Shanghai Cooperation and Turkey's approach to BRICS are further examples of this sympathy. It is good to remember that besides Russia and China, also India, Pakistan, and North Korea, and potentially Iran have nuclear weapons. The fundamental reason for the decline of the capitalist militarist world order is the historical tendency of the profit rate to fall. This forces the global capitalist class to increase the rate of exploitation of the workers everywhere, even in the center. This results in, as John Bellamy Foster said, a rapid growth of proto-fascist and neo-fascist tendencies on the one hand, and the revival of socialism on the other. End of citation. However, in the age of collective imperialism, fascism serves the interests of the transnational capital, so fascist regimes can only exist with the support of the imperialist central led by the United States. This means that to get a greater share from the global profit, national capitalist classes must take away markets and resources from the transnational capitalist class. This requires a fight against the transnational capital and its states. In other words, national capitalist classes must wage a struggle for independence, which is essentially an anti-imperialist struggle. To wage such a struggle successfully, the national capitalist classes must win the support of the working classes. And here comes my conclusion number 3. In the age of the unipolar, hegemonic, transnational monopoly capitalism, that is collective imperialism led by the United States, the fight for national independence can only be based on a progressive, anti-imperialist nationalism, better to say patriotism, which is accompanied by or opens the way to a turn towards socialism. This implies that if Russia or any other BRICS countries or any other country of the global south really want to reach an effective independence from the global imperialist center and build a new multipolar non-imperialist international order where all nations' needs are considered in the spirit of Bandung, they must take a socialist turn. So my summary is to solve the socioeconomic and environmental problems caused by imperialism. First, the sovereignty of states must be restored in the global south. This demands anti-imperialist national struggles supported by the people. To gain this popular support, the national anti-imperialist ruling class of any country must acquire a control over the national production forces and use them for the benefit of the people. It demands a strong state, nationalization of the most important means of production, economic planning, as is always stressed by Alana, and evolving people's democracy, which is important precondition stressed by Dimitris many times. A turn towards such a political economic system is not only a precondition for a real independence and the growing global role of the principles of Bandung Spirit, but it is also a first step on the road to socialism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Many points, very interesting, relevant. China, Chinese leadership necessary, BRICS expansion, new financial order. So besides new information order, but you propose new financial order. Of course, with the currency, etc., de-dollarization, and so forth. So this is points to be, of course, developed later in a separate session. But what is also more questionable is the military, necessary of military force to defeat imperialism. This is, I think, it's a lot of debate for that. And of course, a long way to socialism, which is already declared by since the Bandung countries. They are all in favor of socialism, of course. So I saw here some question from Kanaka-san, for example, about how to justify the Russian attack on Ukraine. For example, we have never talked about this, but I'm thinking of what is called preemptive war. the best strategy to defense is offense. That's what I think Russia tried to do before it was attacked. Then it attacked first. So it's the doctrine of the best strategy of defense. Now let's go to Bruno. What do you think, Bruno?
Yes, a lot of very interesting things have been already said, so I will focus only on two issues. the center periphery issue and why the NAM and eventually most post-Soviet countries are looking quite passive, as you asked. And I will then concentrate on this. So the issue of center periphery, which is of course the situation we have now between the unipolar US-centered world and the rest of the world, let's say, pushes us to the question, who is the center now and who is the periphery? And I will use a very clear-cut image, the Malcolm X image for the current balance of power now, asking who is the master, who is the house Negroes, or who are the house Negroes, and who are the field Negroes in the current international situation. So it looks to me that Ukraine, for example, is at least for the USA, and then as a reaction for a lot of third world countries, looks like the current main house Negroes. Of course, it can change in the future. And I think that you asked the question if Zelensky will meet with Putin at the G20 summit. I will ask another question. Will Zelensky still be president then? Because first of all, if we look for military report, not propaganda report, but real report coming from American, French military specialists, not talking about the Russian one, of course, the Ukrainian army could collapse before the G20 summit. That's one thing. The second thing that looks also possible is that the Ukrainian army will rebel against the government, because if we look at what are the Ukrainian chiefs military telling now, they are very mad at the Ukrainian government because they think that the government make a propaganda war, but because of that, they are sacrificing soldiers in the battlefield. So the relation between the Ukrainian military and the current government in Kiev are now very, very bad. So because of these two situations, the possible collapse of Ukrainian army and the relation between Ukrainian militaries and the government, I'm not sure Zelensky will still be president for a very long time. That's we have to take as a hypothesis that this situation will change quite soon. But anyway, I'm not a prophet, but I ask questions. So I was earlier talking about master house Negro and field Negro. We can also ask the same question in another way. We had, after 1991, it means after the collapse of Soviet Union, a situation what I would define as countries that could be bombed, and countries that it was then unimaginable that they can be bombed. And I will focus then on the Belgrade bombing, because of course, Belgrade was the capital of Yugoslavia. Belgrade was the capital of a country very strongly linked with the non-aligned movement. And the bombing of Belgrade was not only on the bombing of the Yugoslav capital, it was not only the bombing of the non-aligned capital, it was also the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. So it was a very clear manifestation of the divide of the world between the country that could bomb and the country that could be bombed. And now the situation has completely changed. It has slightly changed last year when Israel was bombed by Gaza or Lebanese missile. It was the first step, but the second step is the Ukraine war, because for the first time, a country allied with NATO can be attacked, can be bombed. And I think that's the reason why people in the Western world are afraid of this new situation, consciously or subconsciously, and why people in the third world looks at the Ukraine war as a strategical change in the world balance of power. Whatever they think about Russia, whatever they think about Ukrainian government, about United States, etc., they see that the balance of power is changing, the tide is turning, and that's very important. But in this situation, we have to ask the question you asked, why the NAM is so silent. And I would say not only the NAM, but most of post-Soviet countries also, because they didn't criticize Russia, but they didn't, Central Asian countries or Caucasus countries like Azerbaijan didn't support really clearly Russia. But in the same time, as it was already said, most third world countries and the majority of post-Soviet country opinions are on the side of Russia for the reason I told earlier, because basically these countries are field Negroes and they don't like the house Negro, which is looking like using the Malcolm X definition, the house Negro, which is on the side of the master. And that's quite important. But in the same time, of course, we have to understand why this country are rather silent or late. I would not say they are silent. They are hesitating and they are mostly waiting for what will happen, because they see that the balance of power is changing, but they don't want to risk. And why they don't want to risk? Because the majority of these countries are governed by what we can call a national bourgeoisie. And bourgeoisie in the world, even national bourgeoisie, are always tending to some forms of opportunism, and they are hesitating. It's not mass movement. You told earlier people like Nasser, like Tito, like Gandhi, like Chuen Lai, like Ho Chi Minh, and so on. I mean, all these people were people coming, I would say, bottom-up people coming from masses and fighting for their countries, for their independence, for anti-colonialism. Now we have, it's important to understand that we have no new leaders, as you said, but it's linked with the fact that the social classes leading most of NAM countries, most of post-Soviet countries, are linked with this national bourgeoisie, which are not satisfied by the US-centered world order, but who are not really tending to risk their position in a way anti-colonial countries at Bandung Summit did. But this situation also is changing. Objectively, as it was told, socialism is the only solution for country really tending to change the world the current world-based order. That's one thing. But on the other side, we have very strong and stronger social mobilizations now in the world. We had a huge strike in India, for example, last year. We have a social mobilization in Africa, in Latin America, even in France with the yellow vest. And all this different movement shows that what we called earlier the masses they are coming back, and we can hope that because of that the bottom-up movement, the bottom-up pressures will be stronger and stronger, and then the balance of power in the whole world will change. Because, of course, a large majority, I would say more than 80% of the humankind, and maybe more, are definitely waiting for a new world balance of power, for a new unipolar world, for a real pluralistic world, for a new balance of social relations. And all that is a trend which is, I would say, unevitable. The US Western-centered world is decaying. I mean, and that's because of that they are panicking, and because of that they launch more and more wars. It began with Yugoslav war, Iraq war, Syria war, Libya war, and now Ukraine war. But these wars will not save their power. Of course, they can tend toward world war and nuclear world war, which would be a catastrophe, and we have to fight against that. And that's why the main objective we have to now is to make that arms are not sent to Ukraine, because we need peace, and we don't have to arm warmongers. That's, of course, the first mission we have. But in the same time, if we look at the long term, we understand that the current US-based, US-centered world is finishing. I mean, it's obvious, and it's because of that we are observing signs of panics among world leaders in Europe, and of course also in United States. The development of complete irrational discourse. If we look at Western media's toward Ukrainian war, we had never after the Second World War such a level of fake news as we have now. And fake news are the symbol of irrationality, which is governing the Western world. So I think that the situation, of course, on the short term is very dangerous, but it is very dangerous on the short term because subconsciously, at least, and consciously for the most clever people like Kissinger, who is not our friend, but anyway, he's a rational man. He understands that things are changing, and that rationally analyzing things on the long term, the US-centered world is finished. What is very astonishing, and I will finish on that, in this issue, and especially in the problematic, is why European leaders are so linked with the United States when we observe that, in fact, the Ukraine war is not only a war of US and NATO against Russia, it's also a war against Europe, and even against European bourgeoisie, and especially against German industrial bourgeoisie. So we have to ask how we can explain that German, French government, EU government are so submitted to interests that are against their own interests, their own class interests. I don't talk about the interest of the basic people of France or Germany. I'm just talking now about the interest of their bourgeoisie. They are fighting for the interest of American bourgeoisie and of part of American bourgeoisie. They don't fight for their interest because they are killing themselves. They are committing suicide by the time. So we have to ask, what is the balance of power in Europe? Because it looks that irrationality took control of Europe, when rationality, I would say, emigrated to the south or to the east. And I finish on that.
Thank you, Bruno. Well, I have also astonished why Europe so submitted to United States, I mean, Western Europe. And it is already said by Samir Amin in his analysis long time ago that the objective of US military projects since after the Second World War was to conquer not only Russia and China, but also to conquer Europe.
Yeah.
To fascialize.
We have to remember one thing. It's an anecdote. It's not a very polite one. But anyway, when the so-called Maidan revolution burst in 2014, you had this conversation between Newland and the US ambassador that was taken illegally, but anyway, it was taken. And it finished with this "fuck the EU" coming from Newland, who is now on the leading position in the United States. And I think that this expression is the basic strategy of the United States. Yeah. They are launching war against Russia, but also against Europe. And of course, against the non-aligned countries all over the world, against China and so on, but that's obvious.
Yeah. That's astonishing, amazing. How come? That's I don't understand either. But also, well, when we listen to the media in Africa, the whole Africa is for Russia. The people's movement, activity, actions, etc., etc. It's for Russia. It is also another interesting fact, of course. Well, Grajong.
We should
very short because we have
yes,
to
I
go
would suggest that we hear
Hans Kuchler,
Professor Kuchler, and then have questions. If not,
exactly.
Go. Yes, thank you.
It's okay, Grajong. We will listen first to Professor Hans Kuchler with his wise suggestion or wisdom. That's why I put Hans Kuchler at the end. So, Hans Kuchler, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Yes,
and
please.
I hope that the connection is okay and you can hear me well. I will have to be brief because it is so late and everybody may get tired also. As Azerbaijan has been mentioned several times, I'm just back since few days from that country, from Azerbaijan. We had met in the Karabakh region, in the mountainous region bordering Armenia, where there is a 30 years conflict, almost a frozen conflict, and now a ceasefire. And because it is so pertinent to what has been discussed by other speakers, just let me state this one point. For the time being, it is Russia, it is the Russian military that preserves the fragile peace between the two sides. The Russian military is stationed in the region of Karabakh and guarantees also a safe corridor for the Armenians to Armenia proper. And at the same time, so Russia is a kind of honest broker, and there plays, and I could see that myself, and plays a role that is also appreciated by certain powers that are antagonists of Russia in Ukraine. The presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan met and will soon again meet under the auspices of the European Union in Brussels. That means President Putin's line of mediation is, I mean, he's on the same line of mediation as the European Union concerning that particular conflict. And also the role of Turkey is quite important in that regard. But that is just an aside because Azerbaijan has been mentioned as the chair of the non-aligned movement. But let me introduce just two thoughts, not more now because it is so late. One on the paradigm and the other one on an international legal issue, namely the unilateral sanctions. And I think the G20 summit could have a relevance in both regards. And it could be these 2 points where BRICS and the NAM could also do something about. The first, as far as the paradigm is concerned, you introduced, or you presented to us the paradigms of global rebalancing And that is, as you said, the idea of the or strategy of the West. Then global restructuring, that's what the Global South really intends to achieve. I would introduce here, or would recall a term that was introduced into the discourse by Zbigniew Brzezinski, the former National Security Advisor of the United States under President Carter, undoubtedly or certainly one of the sharpest intellects and most brilliant minds in international strategic thinking. I am not from his school of thought, but I just think that it is of interest to pay attention to the notion of realignment. He wrote a piece, he wrote an article about this shortly before his death. And the idea was he realized that the United States in this situation now will not be able to continue as the global hegemon in a unilateral system. So what is needed in order to avoid the worst, so to speak, for the US is to align itself now in a kind of global coordination with other major players. When he wrote the article, that's around 6 years ago, China in mind. And by the way, I just saw him in China around this time in Beijing in very active conversations with strategic thinkers of China. And the other country he had in mind was Russia. In my view, this kind of realignment, that means the joining of the basis of this, as he envisaged, would be too narrow. And let's just recall when the United Nations were created in 1945, in effect, the Allied powers of the Second World War, who were the victors of the Second World War, they aligned among themselves for the purpose to maintain and preserve international peace and security. And they were the countries with the greatest power at that point in time. Again, now the basis for this such kind of a global alignment, which is represented by the Security Council, is too small. And I agree with the Turkish President Erdogan, and would state here also his slogan: the world is bigger than five. It's bigger than what the 5 permanent members of the Security Council represent. So, and by the way, also BRICS is an alignment of countries of the South who want to somehow coordinate their policies in order to have a stronger influence in the globe and in order not to be marginalized by the Western power bloc. The same, by the way, could also be said about the NAM, the non-aligned movement. These are countries of the South that have aligned among themselves in furthering certain basic principles, namely those of the United Nations Charter. So why not now, for instance, consider paying attention to the membership structure of the G20, of which Indonesia is the president. The G20 membership is inclusive, much more inclusive than the membership of the, in regard to the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, because the G20 brings together the countries, the most influential countries of the global South, with the most influential countries of the Western industrialized world. So why not think about one thing? Is that the membership structure of the G20, could that not be a kind of blueprint for the membership structure of a new reformed Security Council of the United Nations? Because what is important is that we are not thinking in the direction of new blocks facing each other in order to create a kind of new balance of power, which is an idea that has been frequently discussed, but something that goes beyond this paradigm of the balance of power and something that is inclusive. And when I look at I have it here on the other screen, when I look at the list of member states of the G20. This is exactly the inclusive body that a group of countries that could play that role in the United Nations for any reform of the United Nations. So that is one idea in regard to BRICS this year. The other point I would like to make is about unilateral economic sanctions. In legal terms, it is absolutely clear unilateral sanctions are in violation of international law. Only sanctions imposed by the United Nations Security Council are in conformity with the law. Unilateral sanctions are now used in an absolutely extreme and excessive way by the United States, by the European Union, and they are enforced not only against Russia, but against the rest of the world as so-called extraterritorial sanctions or secondary sanctions. And this is an extreme and horrendous arrogation of power, which must not be tolerated by the international community. And I know this is not the policy or position of important countries of BRICS as well as of NAM. And the problem, of course, is for individual countries to be strong enough and to have the courage to stand up against this. Turkey, for instance, did so. Turkey so far has refused the pressure and did not join in these sanctions against Russia, and is, as it seems, also not afraid of secondary sanctions or extraterritorial sanctions. But many other countries are. So why could not, for instance, BRICS countries or countries of the non-aligned movement ultimately make an issue of that and raise that issue in open speech and not just somehow behind locked doors? And why could this topic not be discussed at the summit of the G20? Because it's a topic that relates to the economy. Economic sanctions, that's a use of the economy for certain, in fact, even military purposes or purposes of power politics. It violates international law, it violates the rules of the World Trade Organization, it divides the entire world, and also it creates chaos, as we see now, even here in Europe, because now the people are beginning to suffer and they are becoming impatient because of this backlash of these unilateral sanctions. So my hope is that this could be brought up as an issue, and it would certainly not be against or it would be in conformity with the general agenda of the G20, because it's economy. Ukraine is politics. In my view, to invite Ukraine, yes, there was so much pressure. For sure, this is how I explain it for myself. So much pressure from the United States upon Indonesia, and they may have blackmailed Indonesia that they will not attend unless Ukraine is invited. But by inviting Ukraine, one politicizes the G20, which are an economic forum, and it will be, one opens the space for polemics in an extreme form. But anyhow, should it, whatever happens, we don't know between now and then, but should that invitation materialize, in my view, the only justification, and maybe that was back in the mind also of the Indonesian leadership, the only justification would be that this could create an opportunity for the two sides to meet there and to do something about peace. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much. Indeed, you are right, Professor Hans Kochler. Indonesian view is that in order to stay inclusive and to catch the possibility or the chance to put the two sides together to set up a dialogue, to create the space of dialogue, as Rit Yusha said, safe haven or safe space for dialogue. It is very. I found your proposal on go beyond the division of the binary division between what I call Western Galaxy and Bandung constellation, but go beyond it, and you think that G20 can be the space for that, a platform for this to overcome this division. So that's I think we have all the speakers presenting already their views. Now it's already 3 hours from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the evening. So I suggest maybe we can go until in a half an hour maximum. Okay, if there is a question, answer, or another counter arguments, etc., etc. So I think Grajon want to say something. Grajon.
Yes, thank you for all interesting point of view. Short reply and add something to choose and once. Of course, I agree with Professor Anna Maria that the military aspect is more important to change and defend from imperialism, from unipolar moment, which are defending themselves by tools, different tools in different area, but and military is the most important one. And I think that nowadays this moment we should put on the table with it is named hypersonic tools, yes, rockets, because this kind of weapons have Russia and China also, probably, because there was one test of it, but the Russia have a very broader arsenal of these hypersonic rockets, and probably that's why that a few days ago important American General Milley openly during his speech in Naval War College, as I remember, said that there are 3 military superpowers, Russia, China, and United States, and possibility of war between them are more and more probable. Let's jump to the Professor Bruno Dveski. Most of its content, of course, I agree, but one moment I disagree, because I don't agree that the development of disinformation and so-called how this word is I have a tip of my tongue, fake news. I don't think it is indicator of irrationality of West. I think we should divide, as it was described in 20th century's critical political thought, that there are emancipatory rationality and instrumental rationality. And the first one is, of course, the development of thought, which are aimed at develop of human consciousness and develop of their skills and so on, emancipate them. And instrumental is, of course, how to control them. And I think that fake news and the narration about fake news is new step of these old tools of manipulation, possible thanks to this networking transnational informational society, which I have spoken a little bit during my speech. And last remark to Professor Kochler, I think that is the most important, essentially moment during our discussion is the necessity of building new paradigm, which must consider the different situation and development of different civilization and their dignity and their new possibility, and it, I think, needs to build and reconstruct our language and imagination and reconstruct our world of view, because for instance, balance of power is an old language built by European nations, and theories of international relations are also built by European nations from Western civilization. And it is a very important moment to build another language which are most actual to our newest knowledge also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grajon. I think, so Isaac, you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. Very short, because it's late. Thank you for you raised so much questions and very interesting insights. I would like to just comment one or 2 points from Africa, from Burkina Faso, and I thank Bruno for he and other who emphasized the fact that there are social movements in the south, in Burkina, for instance, where I am living now, and this movement will not stop. I don't think so, because we are in this second decolonization where people are getting more conscious of what is going on. And even if, Bruno, by the way, I missed some contextualization for the Negro metaphor you used.
It's Malcolm X. It's Malcolm X definition.
Yes, of course. I don't think I don't say you shouldn't use them, but just in the context, it helps. It would help feel more comfortable. By the way, but this is aside. So, but you pointed out the fact that there are movements, and now there is a very strong desire for delinking, for disconnection with those imperial historical masters. But NAM and BRICS are, we also hear it from many of your panelists, are platforms, alternatives, ways, because once here, for instance, in Burkina, we have the military at the power since January, and there is a big pressure to go another way than the old usual way in the cooperation with France, for instance. But now, and to get some credibility, those people on the power, they say, they have the statement to say, yes, we are free to choose the new partners we need. And meaning by, we will go and work with Russia and with China and BRICS countries and so on. But this is a statement, they have to repeat it in order to get some credibility here in the population. But where are the platforms, the alternatives? Where are the possibilities, the options they will use in that way? So I think from this view, from Burkina at least, from Mali also, Mali is struggling in order to get its freedom from old France and the old way to manage things. And Mali is paying the big price for this desire to just get rid of old ways to solve the problems in Mali. And this is why I totally agree with the idea, the view that we have here platforms, alternative scenes to tackle the issues. And now there is a problem of reading and interpretation of local dynamics by the center, the old centers. It's why the US, for instance, are portraying China on that way, and by the there is another aspect of it. While painting China on that way, like Chikwan very good explained, they portrayed also Africa as a child, the victim, and you should pay attention and be careful in the way you go new ways with BRICS, with Russia or with China. So I think this is a very important moment we are experiencing. The changes come through organized and peaceful processes, but they also occur through difficult chaos. And this is, I persist on that view, this is a breaking point. We have the possibility here to reshape, to redesign, the order, and it's important to focus on the moral force. We hear that NAM is a moral force emphasized by the previous leaders, since the beginning, and I think this is always still the moral force we need. So thank you. Some few words, since we didn't hear anything from Africa, I wanted to share some thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a lot of questions. I saw also in the chat, for example, about the UN reform. I think Hans Kogler already also mentioned that the need for UN reform. And I doubt if a G20 can be credible as a platform for representing people of the world, because it is based mainly on economic size, not economic. So that's a question. And about breaking point, it is very interesting, because during the COVID-19, we thought that, yes, this is the moment to prepare for a post-capitalist, post-patriarchy, post-consumerist society after the end of the pandemic. But it seems to be that we will go back to business as usual. So it is also a problem. Breaking point is interesting, but why we always come back to business as usual? That's another question. Now,
may I just respond to what you said about my statement?
Yes.
Just 1 minute, in order to avoid misunderstandings. I did not mean that the G20 as it exists should be the institution that could do something for reform of the UN and the Security Council. What I meant is the membership structure of the G20 is much more inclusive than the membership structure of the Security Council. And those countries that have aligned themselves for economic purposes in the format of the G20 could be somehow countries that could be members of a reformed, permanent members of a reformed Security Council. That is what I meant, the structure of membership in terms of reform. Of course, the scope in the UN, the scope is much wider than just the economy. Yeah. What I miss in the list of members of the G20 is Nigeria. That I do not see here. That is something, hopefully, that they will address.
Yeah.
And that they will enlarge. In terms of Africa, I only see South Africa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you. I saw here Elena, it seems, Elena and Anna Maria. Please, Elena.
Thank you very much for speech of Tariaka, because my opinion, we understand that we should go from this economic chaos, which now has special ideology, and this ideology is created by the West think tanks. And we have, in my opinion, only this forum where we're speaking about new paradigm and how to change this chaos to create new economic order. But my opinion, if we want to be more constructive, maybe it will be okay if we will write in our resolution that should be created special scientific practical center, which will be responsible for development of new paradigm and for instruments which can realize and practice how to go away from economic chaos. And this center should be something as to implement functions, propaganda, to teach new cadres for the new old, for the new order for all countries, and to have discussions with West think tanks, which are very weak because they have no mechanism how to go away from global crisis. They can organize only next World War. It is, and it seems to me that G20, which has such function to coordinate economic policy of different countries, to go for to stable way of development of the world, maybe should have such initiative to create principle different scientific practical center. It will be very good way, because when I had some talks from people from South Africa, we had meetings in our conference in Russia, they understand very quickly what we need to create a new society. And my opinion, it is not enough to have such meetings only in Bandung conference. We should have some institutionalization, because before we want to change UN, I want to say UN became very weak today. All his recommendations are the same what the Western tanks give him these recommendations, and no any voice from another side. So it is my opinion, we should do something, not only to speak in our forums. We should begin to be more active to implement our decisions. Thank you very much.
Anna Maria, you want to say?
Yeah, thank you. Two remarks. One is concerning the structure of the G20, which, well, much better than the Permanent Security Committee of the UN. I agree in that. However, we must not forget Germany, France, and Italy have a double representation in G7, because the European Union is also represented and have a vote in G20. So I feel a little bit unbalanced. Also, it is much better than the UN Security Committee. This was one remark. The second is concerning the military power. I think it's an illusion to think that imperialism will give up peacefully. It will never give up. And we see it very clearly in the case of Ukraine. And I think Russia defended the world by performing this attack, because it was provoked, as you know, I hope, by the United States via Ukraine. If Ukraine eventually, together with Georgia, become member of NATO, and it will continue to provoke Russia, and it would continue to provoke Russia, then Russia would get into a contact with the NATO, which would have meant a third world war. So this was the last moment for Russia and for the world to make a step and to prevent Ukraine and Georgia to become a member of NATO. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Maria. You evoke about the G20 structure. I think also the structure is fragile. I mean that the West, led by US, can boycott the G20, and it can be, I mean, G20 can disappear just because US and their allies do not agree with the decision of the G20, for example. So this is another point I want to remark. As far as military defeat or military victory against the Western hegemony, this is very dilemma, I think, because it means that it will increase the arm races. So it needs a lot of discussion, I think, on this issue. Now, Jomo, I saw here Jomo. Jomo is our colleague from Malaysia, economist, and once working with UN. Jomo, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Pak Darwis. As time is very late, let me make a few brief comments.
Yes.
I think I very much agree with the sentiment about those who are very concerned about a very apocalyptic future. The problems raised by war and the threat of nuclear war, the threat of global warming are all very serious, and there is no serious international effort to deal with it. But specifically, as far as the G20 is concerned, I think it is very important for us, since this meeting seems to be oriented around the G20 summit, to recognize what the character of the G20 is, to recognize its summit, not to expect too much to come out of it because of the very nature of the G20 and how it has become increasingly irrelevant in the last decade, especially after the early part of the last decade. So what realistically can we expect? I think the world economy faces very, very serious problems right now. We have a situation where the world economy has been slow for more than a decade and now will become even slower. At the same time, we have the threat of inflation, which is going to be made worse by raising interest rates, because raising interest rates, which are not going to bring down inflation, because the inflation is being caused by supply chain disruptions, but because of conflicts between the new Cold War between the US and Japan versus China, cutting off cutting off investments in those countries and asking the investors to come back to their own home countries. So that is not going to be affected. That is not going to be solved by raising interest rates. And now we have the real possibility of a period of stagflation, stagnation as well as inflation. This is a very, very serious threat. And the G20 agenda, as it has been developed by the finance ministers, does not seem to address it. Let us face it, Indonesian finance ministry was made in Washington. You know, there is no serious attempt to address these issues. So unless we have a lot of pressure on the president's office to orient the discussion to deal with the pressing urgent issues in the world, it is very unlikely that the leaders of the G20 countries are going to be able to act together to address the problems of serious inflation, of serious stagnation, and all made worse by sanctions. The countries which are suffering the most are developing countries, especially countries in Africa. Many of the countries in Africa and North Africa and the Middle East are importing their wheat from Russia and Ukraine. And they also depend very heavily on Russia and Belarus for fertilizer. This is going to mean a big threat to food security, not only this year, but also for many years to come when you don't use enough fertilizer. So we are creating the conditions for mass starvation. Sanctions are a weapon of mass starvation. And the G20 can do something about it, but at the rate things are going, it is unlikely to do anything about it. It is going to be as bad as the G7 in terms of its irrelevance. The G7 has just come out with a report basically endorsing, denying the NATO responsibility for sanctions and the implications of those sanctions. There are many other things we should be discussed. We are serious about trying to influence the G20 summit, but it seems to me those are the most urgent. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jomo. This is very important issue. And we should also know that the G20 was coming out from G7. So it was fabricated by G7 initially. Well, now remains.
I'm sorry, the G20 came out because the G7 was increasingly irrelevant.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because that's why the objective is to how do you say, to create the stability, because with the G7 it doesn't solve the question of crisis, stability, etc., etc. That it is expected with the G20 the world economy will be more stable, but it is not. Now it remains maybe 5 minutes, so I think I propose that we stop here and we will discuss, will organize another meeting if necessary. But I want to mention some points which is very, very important related to our topic, which is what is the opportunity of BRICS and NAM and for Russia-Ukraine crisis in G20. And I think it is recognized that it is the opportunity for BRICS and NAM to play a role in the global order, international order, and including in this case the Russia-Ukraine crisis is a part of the international order. So, but we don't have really discussed how BRICS and NAM could play the role. We just said that it is important for BRICS. It is a good opportunity to BRICS and NAM to play a role in G20 for a new international order. And I think the most concrete proposal came from Yusha, that BRICS and NAM can be a kind of safe space for dialogue. That's the most important. And another point, I think very important, information warfare, information order, new information. I think two, information order and financial order. I think it is very, very important to take up. And then I think also important is the Indonesian position or Indonesian stand in G20 and Indonesian ambitions to maintain G20 stay present or united, or at least that all the member countries will come and discuss in Indonesia. This is the ambition of Indonesia. That is why Indonesia accept the pressure to invite Ukraine, because Indonesia wish that United States come. That's because it's already blackmail if Ukraine is not invited and United States will not come, and the G20 will be a fail for Indonesian ambition. It be failure. And also because Indonesian position is also is between China and India, between Australia. So Indonesia is also surrounded by a kind of NATO, as Connie already said previously. Indonesia is surrounded by AUKUS, Quad, and
FPA. Five Power Defense Arrangement.
Yes, yes. So that's why Indonesian position is very unique in G20. It's between China, India, the West, and also NATO, Quad, and what's the AUKUS, etc., etc. So it's Indonesia is also very vulnerable, and with the diversity, the diverse problems, the 17,000 islands, that the risk of separation, independentist movement, etc., etc., is very huge. So that's why Indonesia plays its role very, very carefully, very, very carefully. So that's what I want to say. Maybe Isaac, if you want to say something.
No, thank you. Just an invitation. I know many of our attendees today expressed their interest in the coming conference in Ouagadougou here, the Rethinking Revolution. So I will copy paste the link. If you wish to submit your abstract, it's really, really important to do it right now because we close the call for papers, but please do so if you wish to participate. So here is the link. You may just click on it and register, and we will consider your abstract. Thank you. It was great to participate today.
What is this? Final de la Ligue des Champions? No, this is. So, if there is no remarks anymore, I think I would like to thank you very much for your patience, your participation during 3.5 hours of exchange, discussion, etc. Fikri, you want to take photo? Yeah, Fikri is our assistant, the students who wish to take photo of everybody. So please.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, please open your camera.
Okay.
Okay, I will count on 3, and then yeah, just screen capture our picture.
So sorry, it will be recorded, included in the recording or not?
The registration, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it means then that when we put online the recording, the photo, family photo will be included. That's you mean? Yes.
Okay. Well, 1, 2, 3. Wait, one more.
That was.
Okay, another page. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And remind you the salutation of Indonesia. Horas.
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 Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye.
So, Isaac, maybe you want to say, to discuss a bit of our affairs. I will stop the recording, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.